Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of the book and Dagger. And it's been a while since I posted anything. I apologize. I've been super busy, and the hurricane came through, so I hope y'all are staying safe out there. But we're going to resume our journey as I read along our read along of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. As you can see, I have my nice, lovely, beautiful copy here, and we're going to go ahead. If you have not seen, I've done two videos, and we've done chapters 1 and 2 of The Hobbit. Me doing an abridged reading, basic storytelling along, but not spoiling everything. So hopefully you can go out and hopefully if you've not read The Hobbit, it will interest you to go out and buy your own copy and read it. And if you have read it, hopefully you'll just enjoy the ride again as we revisit it. We're going to go ahead and get right back into chapter 3, though, of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, A Short Rest. And basically, after Bilbo and his friends have escaped the trolls and they found the swords in the troll cave, they go along, they journey, they're heading for Rivendell, which Gandalf has said he's got friends there. And they're journeying along, and they eventually, for a couple more days, they eventually begin to see mountains in the distance. And Bilbo asks if it is the mountain, which, of course, being a mountain, they're going to. And Balin says, "Of course not. That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have got to go through or over or under those somehow before we can come into wilder land beyond. And it is a deal of a way, even from the dusk. Whoops, I skipped a page there. Even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, "Not for the last time." Anyway, so then Gandalf is leading the way, and he tells them they must not miss the road or they will be done for. He says, "We need food for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the beginning again if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them, only one vast slope going slowly up and up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain, a wide land the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of green grass and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down in surprise to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep, with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land than the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, and others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead. But they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not yet risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall on the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. And they had finally reached the valley of Rivendell. They could hear the voice of scurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom, the scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light at the valley end across the water. And eventually, as they are going into the valley of Rivendell, they hear elves singing and greeting them. The elves are singing a song and laughing, and J.R. Tolkien proceeds to then list several phrases or verses of the song, which is Elvish, traditional Elvish song, which doesn't make sense to mortals. It's J.R. Tolkien says, "You would find it pretty nonsense, I dare say." Anyway, and then the elves see the dwarves, and then proceed elves because elves like to poke fun at dwarves. The elves proceed to make fun of the dwarves, and they begin to laugh at dwarves on ponies and stuff. And then one elf comes out and says, "Welcome to the valley," and bows. And Thorin says, "Thank you," a little gruffly. But Gandalf gets off his horse and begins to talk with the elves. And the elves eventually point them to where the last homely house where Elrond, the master of Rivendell, lives. And so they eventually arrive at the last homely house, or Rivendell, which is one of the most beautiful places in Middle Earth. It's basically a house, massive house in a valley, like on the edge of the mountainside. And they stayed there, stayed long in the house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there is little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men of the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. This is a little interesting tidbit. So Elrond, who is a major character in Lord of the Rings, he is actually not a full, well, he's a full elf, but he originally was a half elf. He was born, his father was a mortal man, his mother was an elf. And so for a time, he was this, he was actually the first, him and his brother Elros, which this is explained a lot in Lord of the Rings. Him and his brother Elros were actually half elf, half man. And then eventually, because elves and men are so different, they were told, hey, you have to decide whether you want to be fully elf or fully man. And Elros chose to become fully man, and Elrond chose to become elf. So that's why he's elf, and he's lived for thousands of years, and he's now governing Rivendell, and he's the master of the house. And it describes Elrond as he was as noble and as fair a face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you liked food, or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales or one or two of the songs I had heard in that house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended as well as their bruises, their tempers and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions light to carry but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. And also since Elrond knows about runes, Gandalf and Thorin show him the swords they got in the troll cave. And the day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, he said, "These are not troll made. These are old swords, very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars. They must have come from a dragon's horde or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago. This Thorin, the runes named Okrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foe hammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "I could not say," said Elrond, "but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or came on the remnants of old robberies in some hole in the mountains. I have heard that there are still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war." Thorin pondered these words. "I will keep this sword in honor," he said. "May it soon cleave goblins once again." "A wish that is likely to be granted soon enough in the mountains," said Elrond. "But show me now your map." And then he looks at the map that Thorin and Gandalf have, and he reveals that there are moon letters which are engraved on the map, which are basically rune letters. You cannot see them only except for when the moon shines on them. And the dwarves invented them, wrote them with silver pens into the map. And Gandalf and Thorin are a little disappointed because they're a little upset that Elrond found this about the map and they didn't know about it. But then Elrond says that in the moon letters, it says, "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day shall shine upon the keyhole." "Durin, Durin," said Thorin. "He was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarves, the Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir." "Then what is Durin's day?" said Elrond. "The first day of the dwarves' new year," said Thorin, "is, as all should know, the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's Day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. This will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time shall come again. That remains to be seen, said Gandalf. Is there any more writing? None to be seen by this moon, said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin, and then they went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the midsummer's eve. The next morning was a midsummer's morning as fair and fresh as could be dreamed, blue sky and never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure and with a knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. And that concludes chapter 3 of The Hobbit. And be on lookout for chapter 4 of The Hobbit coming soon.